Welcome, everyone. We're just putting things together here. So as you get yourself settled and grab a cup of water, we're excited to be able to introduce everyone to Aimee tonight. Some of you, if you've been on our conferences before, Aimee was a previous award winner, but she has two special guests here tonight with her that are her probably the best way to say this is they are special guests and complete angels in at least your path towards, getting the right care, getting the right treatment, and huge advocates for you, and also known as your parents. So that is really important.
Yeah, I'll say my parents, I have to have them with me. So much of how I manage my illness and the way that hi Esther.
Hi, Aimee.
That I grew up in my story is with them, It was so much a part of them. How I manage things now is a part of them. How I view life is a part of them. So they are my story, whether I like it or not. But they have been huge advocates. And I think as a child with MG, they are great. They did everything right for me, and it's not easy, but they're a part of my story, and I'm happy they're here. My mom's Sue. You can.
Hi, Sue.
My dad's John.
Good
Hello.
to see you.
Hey,
Hi, John.
John, is it John or Jon?
John.
Okay, great. I'm going to add you to Aimee's, even though your last name is different, I'm going to add their names. So if somebody wants to ask you specifically a question, what either of you, your name will be in her name so that at least, and parents, John and Sue, right?
Right.
All right, got it. I'm going to jump in and introduce you, Aimee. So this is really should be Lisa introducing you, because Lisa, first of all, you've been, an award winner for her award that she gives out each year at our conference. You've been a support group leader. You have gatherings in your area. And not only are you somebody who really is a great peer mentor to other people who are on the path that you're on, you have two great peer mentors for parents who are on either side of you. Can you give us an overview of first of all, introduce your parents?
Well, first, this is John, my young father, and this is Sue. Hello, Sue Jazik, a young mother.
Thank you very much. So I know we're going to go through kind of your story, but then also really some of your story on your treatment plan, and your how you focused on making sure that you were getting the right treatments. And I know you're married recently, because I saw your name change, and your husband was on the conference with you, which was great to see because I had not met him before. So I'm going to ask people, first of all, you're going to be able to ask questions in person, but I'm going to ask you while we're first having your story, if you could mute yourselves, I will do the same, just so in case that there's background noise or something that we don't have some background noise. We are recording this, so please know that you'll be able to ask questions. I'll let you unmute yourselves at another point. And if you have other questions that you want Lisa, who is my wingman this morning, to ask, if you could put them in the chat, or if you want to ask them of her in person, kind of hold them, and we'll open up the lines towards the end. All right. Thank you. Take it away, Aimee.
Well, great. Well, first of all, I'm Aimee Smithem, formerly known as Aimee Jazik. So happy to be here. And I'm really grateful to finally tell my story. It has been a long journey. Although I may seem young, it seems like it's been a forever pathway because I've had it. I've had MG more than I haven't in my life. So it really, to me, is a norm. And I'm here, and my story is to say it's actually, out of all the chronic illnesses, it's a pretty good one to have in all of things for me. It was very manageable. And I'm able to live a very productive and healthy life and become the person I am because of my MG. It really has been a blessing in some ways. And in the past, I wasn't able to share it. I didn't have the muscle strength. I didn't have the stamina, and I really didn't have the insight or, I was still the student. I have a lot of my mentors there that were sharing their story, that through their insight and help and their support, I can be here today. And so that I feel like it is a successful story because I've had support and because I've had parents, and I've been very blessed for it. So I'm so happy to be here. That's the beginning. That's not even the start. So buckle up. Okay, I'm 46 years old. Like I said, I've had MG most of my life. I was diagnosed with general myasthenia gravis, acetylcholine receptor, antibody positive. Oop. That's my husband. He'd like to be here, but he can't. But he'd love to be here. But I was diagnosed with generalized MG, acetylcholine receptor, antibody positive when I was 12 years old. But my journey actually with MG, not even knowing it, began a few years before when I was 9. I went, my mom took me in for a chest x-ray because I had pneumonia. And the chest x-ray led to a CT scan, which revealed a large mass, a tumor in my thymus, a thymoma. I was sent to a thoracic surgeon at the U of M, and it was called a benign mediastinal mass was removed entirely. However, because I didn't have MG, it was a thymoma. It wasn't necessarily a complete thymectomy. But the surgeon, when we look back at all the results, all the tests, the surgeon it did look like he removed all the tissues, all the glands. I haven't had anything recurred, but it wasn't necessarily the thymectomy because of the MG. I had not even been diagnosed with MG yet, which is a bit unusual from what I've learned. So after I had the thymectomy and that tumor was removed, it was benign. I recovered well. Life resumed as normal. And I was a very active child. I was into music. Mom had us in dance, gymnastics, any type of sports activity. I was one of the first girl hockey players in Michigan and just loved to be active. My parents were active. So after a couple years later, after I'd had that surgery, I started noticing weakness in my arms. I started slurring my speech. I noticed I couldn't smile. It was pretty evident that something was wrong. My parents first recall that I couldn't smile in pictures. And when they asked me why, I just told them I couldn't. But my first memory was in gymnastics when I was on the parallel bars and just couldn't grip. It just would let go. And I pretty much knew something was wrong, and my muscles were pretty heavy. And then I think the last thing before we really noticed something was wrong or the last straw was when I was during a report in school, and I just started slurring my speech. And I had the surgery, so people had thought it was from the surgery, but we kind of knew something else was going on. So my doctor got me right in to a neurologist in a small town up here in Petoskey. They did the striation test, the tinselin test, all the right tests, and immediately diagnosed me with MG. So I was pretty fortunate with that, that it wasn't a long road. He put me on Mestinon, and that controlled my symptoms when I was young. I still was very active. I still could do things. But I guess what I really, as a kid, my life was full. It was active. And growing up with MG or any illness, I think with children, you don't know any different. Or as an adult, you know, there's difference, you know, what's wrong. With me, I didn't really know how I should feel. I didn't really know that I should feel a certain way. So I kind of just rolled with the punches. And if I couldn't do something, I just adapt. Kids are really adaptable, and they're very, you know, so I was one that my parents never put limitations on me. They just said, here you go, you're going to keep doing it. And as long as I felt strong enough, I did. And the Mestinon worked really well. So that was one thing about being a kid, that as you're an adult, I don't think sometimes you're able to do that. Growing up, my house was busy. They were active, or my siblings were active. My parents were active. My high school, college, and early professional years were somewhat filled with ups and downs. In high school, I was on Mestinon still, but started intermittent times with prednisone when I needed to be stronger, when things were stressful. This ended up being mostly a low dose of prednisone with like every 4 hours Mestinon for most of my high school years when I look back. But I was able to do everything I wanted to. I was senior class treasurer, Spanish club president. I was on the dance team. I was on a community dance team. I was on the cheerleading squad. I was in varsity soccer. I mean, sometimes when I say I'm tired, I look at all you're doing and I'm like, you know, of course I'm tired. This is normal tired stuff. It's pretty amazing what I was able to do with just Mestinon and prednisone. However, later in college, or I started college, I went to college in Cleveland and continued with active sports, but it was a lot harder. And so we decided that we wanted to try something new. And I didn't like being on prednisone. It made me bloated. And so I wanted to try other options. And my neurologist, who had been with me this whole time, we still keep in contact with him. He was my first pediatric neurologist from Milwaukee. We chose IVIG, and we looked at all these options. One thing that my parents have always done that's been so beneficial is when something changed, or I wanted to change something, or I wasn't feeling like I could do something I wanted to, we'd reassess my treatment options. So as long as I was doing what I was doing and I wanted to do everything, we would kind of continue on a plan. And then let's say I would say, oh, I want to do this and I can no longer, my muscles can't work. Then we'd go with my doctor and kind of reassess the options. So that was really helpful. And we decided to go with IVIG. We also didn't look at the more invasive medications when you're young, such as the immunosuppressants. We didn't want to start those. We held off as long as we could. So we tried the least invasive things, and the options were different. I don't even know, this was probably 2001. So IVIG was it 2001 or 96? No, it was probably 1995, 96. It was pretty new to us. So started that, and that seemed to work and manage my symptoms. I never felt really strong, but I felt better. So I was able to get off the prednisone and kind of go through college, graduate college. I traveled Europe, lived in Europe for 3 months, and traveled and worked in Scotland and worked in community mental health. I was able to get treatment there. I traveled afterwards for 3 months backpacking through Europe. And at that time, I did have a pretty bad exacerbation. I was doing everything wrong. my doctor was telling me not to do anything. It was everything saying no. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. Okay, but don't do this. And I'm like, okay. And one thing I'll say is, with my MG, there are points in my life that looking back on it, it probably wasn't the best idea, but I did it anyway. And I was able to manage and get through it. And I learned a lot. And even though I would not get to that point again, I learned exactly what to do in a crisis, what worked in a crisis, what did not. So when I was in Europe having the exacerbation, my doctor and my mom and dad set up a treatment in Germany. We were able to get it done. My mom was in 2 days. But we had also planned for something too. We planned ahead, but we were able to get that process set up in 2 days in a hospital in Germany. I was able to get from one city to the next to pick it up at a pharmacy, drive it or get it to the next city to the hospital. They gave it to me, and I was able to continue for like 2 more months on that trip because of that. And one thing I learned from that is that, one, I would have done prednisone. I would have gone on prednisone. But two, I could get this stuff done and I could manage my own care. I was very capable, and it helped me realize I needed to plan ahead for the future if I wanted to travel and continue this type of lifestyle, because I don't want to get to that point again, although I can. So with each point in life, I guess what I'm trying to say, at each time, at each period in life, at each exacerbation, I would sit back, relook at what I did wrong. And I learned so much growing up, what to do to manage my symptoms in the future to avoid crisis. And with MG, I think it's so important to know your limits, to know your body, to know what you can and cannot do. And then to know, hey, when this is happening, these are what work for me. So I guess through those whole things, I got back from Europe. The IVIG helped me get through Europe and got back home. And going into my 30s, I had a couple experiences where the IVIG wasn't working, and I wanted to reassess my options again. So we went back to my neurologist, said, hey, what can we do? And we started looking at plasmapheresis. And I should kind of back up there, because one of the things that led to that crisis to start plasmapheresis was I had a pregnancy. I had a child, and it was an awesome pregnancy. During the pregnancy, I was very healthy. I was only on Mestinon, and I really didn't have any symptoms of my MG. However, afterwards, my neurologist had left the practice, and because I was following up with my OBG mostly, I didn't follow up with my MG because it was well controlled. So when I went to make an appointment with my neurologist, I had to find a new one, and that took so long. And in that time, my MG started coming back with a vengeance. So by the time I got into a new neurologist, I was having double vision and I was having ocular symptoms, which I had never had before. My new neurologist put me immediately back on an immunosuppressant, but it would take, long to get into. And they put me on the plasmapheresis, which along with that, prednisone and the immunosuppressant Mestinon got me out of it. But it took about 2 years of like lying around with blurred vision, with double vision, not being able to work. It was a really tough time. However, what I learned from that was plasmapheresis works very well for me. And it substituted for the IVIG. And I got hooked up with a really great neurologist. I realized I got to stay ahead of things, and I need to stay on my immunosuppressant. Like, I can't be going off. If I go off of it for a pregnancy or for a reason, I got to get back on it. That's something, because you don't want to wait. So after that, after I got out of that exacerbation, I continued with plasmapheresis. But I backed off on that, and I was able to get just on my Cellcept and my Mestinon and continued to do that. And now I think we're into my 40s now, and I'm was working full time as an occupational therapist. And Solaris came out, and once again, I went to my doctor, my neurologist. I said, and my mom and dad are doing research through the whole thing. I say to him, I want to try something new. I'm really not happy with where I'm at. What can we do? And one thing I'll point out with my neurologist, with any neurologist I've had, if I don't feel open and willing to talk to them, or I find a new one. And I've done that many times, or a couple times, where I just wanted, your relationship with your neurologist is so important. And you have to have one that might not be always the most knowledgeable, but willing to work with you and willing to suggest things, because you're going to have these ups and downs, what I found throughout life, and you're going to have to go back and tweak your medicine, learn new things. You have to be proactive, and you have to know what's best for your body. And I've been really fortunate to have good ones. Yeah. Oh, sorry. My dad wants to say something.
Go ahead and finish your.
So that when I would go to him, he would say, okay, let's look at this. Let's reassess. And that's when Solaris was coming out, and I was a candidate for that. And that was, I think, in 2019 or 2020 when I started on the Solaris. And within a day, I was better than I'd ever felt from probably when I was 13. This was better than it was amazing results for me. My dad wants to say
I one of the things that I and my wife learned here is that your neurologist is not your doctor. They have to be your partner.
Thanks.
And by that, I mean, you have to do a lot of research, because a lot of things are happening. And one of the great ways to do research is get involved with a group like you're listening to right now. Go to their seminars. They bring in drug representatives that have done multiple testing. They bring in doctors who have treated this many different ways. So you gain a wealth of experience, because then when you go to your neurologist, you should be prepared to talk to them about these things that you might want to try. That's how we got to Solaris, which has been a real godsend to my daughter. We just heard about it. Then we started talking to our neurologist, he's open to this kind of discussion. He's like, well, I've heard of it, and let me check into it. And then the next thing we know, it's a great solution for us.
And we didn't just take it, and we didn't just take it and go with it either. My mom, another wonderful researcher, she set us up with an appointment at Mayo Clinic. And she said, hey, you've been... And I said, no, I've done everything. I know where I'm at. I don't need... Mayo Clinic's not going to tell me anything new that I don't already know. Let's just try this new thing. And it was so helpful. They were the best, one of the best things I think I've done as a tune-up. Even though you think you might know everything, all we did was just give them all my information. They have a whole team look at everything. It's pretty easy. You send everything in, and they say, yep, you're doing the right thing, or nope, you're not. And they do assess you, and you're scheduled for a whole week. But going in there, we had, and thank God I kept such good records, or my mom kept such good records of everything, because we hand them a big pile of things. And we scheduled an appointment during COVID. It runs like clockwork at Mayo Clinic. I had such a great experience there that I keep modeling. This is what Medicare should be like. This is what can happen, and they were on time. He assessed everything. They did a few retests. They retest my nerve conduction test, because I hadn't had one done in a while. And the doctor sat there with us for 2 days. And afterwards he said, I don't think we need any more tests for you. I recommend, so I think the Solaris would be great. Mm-hmm. And he kind of confirmed that. And I still can write to him. I still have a relationship with him, and that's just more help. you know, so that really helped me. And I recommend it if you haven't, or you're at a crossroads, or you haven't had everybody look at. I think for anybody, not just MG, if you've been through the ringer or had a long time with different doctors or been on a certain plan, it's good to have a fresh set of eyes to go in there and look at things to make sure you're not double dosing, or you're not taking, you know, you're taking appropriate meds, or, you know, because sometimes things get missed, or they might have a different perspective, or different options. So that was really helpful. The Mayo Clinic confirmed the Solaris. I started it and I've loved it ever since. And it really does make sense. I'm on my, I do continue my immunosuppressant. I do take Mastinon intermittently, and I do the Solaris every 2 weeks. I wish I could do it less because my veins are somewhat difficult, but I'm looking at what's the other
Sublingual.
No, the other Ultomiris, is it the other one like it?
Mhm.
The other option just like it, but just a little bit longer in between those treatments, not every 2 weeks, because it's done great for me. But one thing with medications and concoctions, I think for everyone there's something that works. Not everything works for everyone, and doses matter. The amount that you're taking, how your body reacts matters. And so don't get set on one type or one amount, or, you know, be willing to be open, but everybody's so different that it's hard to say this is what works for me. And what really works, or all I can say is what works for me, and it's pretty much the generalized MG stuff, and that is the prednisone when bad exacerbations. I use Mastinon, and then the Solaris and the immunosuppressant. This year, my goals is the homeopathic, more changing my diet, looking and really sticking to it, because diet matters with everything. And I think it's huge, avoiding those sugars, processed sugars. I know that would help me feel better. The other, or I guess for any type of illness, or all the speakers have the same formula. I'm going to tell you, stay active, get as much exercise as you can, but do the right amount of exercise. So, or the right type of exercise in the right amount. I was doing CrossFit for a while because, of course, I'm ignoring everything and I just want to push, and it's not good for me. And it's not fun, for one thing, but, and so I don't keep it up. But those activities are not good for MG. Those heavy lifting, like deep impact on your joints, are tough, I think, at least for the majority and for me. So things like dance, I can continue to dance. Things like, for me, like a cardio, a walking, yoga is fantastic. And not only does yoga help, you know, with posture, positioning, breathing, you can modify it. So just breathing is exercise, you know, and that's in relaxation. It benefits everything. And for MG, it's really a great exercise. So staying active has been really a main part of my life. The other thing that with my parents I want to touch up on is they have a way of living that's kind of like, they're a family of engineers. My mom is the wife of an engineer, so she knows how to fix a lot of disasters sometimes, but they're problem solvers. And so, like I said, growing up, we never really looked at what I couldn't do. They never made me feel like my MG was holding me back, or that, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that because you've got this. It was always, yes, yeah, you know, oh, you want to be in soccer? Yeah, let's go do it. And then they'd, you know, be right there on the sidelines watching me, you know, struggle. And I was like, you know, not the best player, but I was part of the team. And I learned how to fail, or I learned how to struggle. I learned about myself. there were times growing up that I really, really struggled, like in Europe that one time. There's other times, but I got through 100%. And that is, if you don't take those risks to some extent, or if you don't even get outside and try to do things that you might not think you can, you're not going to build up that and see what you can do, I guess.
I guess I'd like to say
yeah.
something.
Yeah.
In Aimee's life growing up, and we let her try everything. You know, she would be the one that would call it off if she didn't want to do something. But to me, there was a miracle. Aimee had MG. Aimee could not smile. Aimee was in show choir. Aimee was the homecoming queen. It was like God was taking care of her. And I just thought she was so courageous. She just did. And I just really thought it was a miracle. This young girl, all through high school, grade school, couldn't smile, but yet she was a homecoming queen. And I just get a little emotional about that. But, you know, she did it. She did it.
Well, because you learn to, you got to do it, but you also, you don't know what you don't know, you know, you just kind of get by like kids, you adapt to things, and, you know, you can't smile, but you can still do things. I had a lot of friends, you can't, I guess like focus on things you can control and not let those things that you can't control, stop you from living life. You know, you really do have to keep going with it. So but I do put a lot of how I handle my MG and how I view life on my parents. You know, that a lot of times I felt like I got left behind because they're pushing me too hard, and they're like, well, your kid, everybody's climbed the mountain and I'm the last one. But they challenged me and they taught me how to adapt and rest. And those were invaluable lessons for me. As somebody, they gave me skills to be positive about it and to use my MG positively, because with that, I learned what I was capable of. I learned that I wanted to go into medicine, and that I knew about medicine because I'd spent so much time in hospitals. I learned I liked geriatrics, which I never thought, but I did grow up around older people, and they were more my I think at times my pace, you know, I kind of, and so that energy conservation, the adaptability, living life a little easier, those are all things I learned growing up that led me to now be an occupational therapist and focus on those things. So what my career is I help older people or people with disabilities be able to stay home more independently by adapting their home to make things easier and more accessible. I'm doing an adaptive clothing line to help people who can't manipulate fasteners, or, you know, and to get easier dressing. If you're in a wheelchair, you're not having to pull things down. You can just attachments on the side, zippers, magnetic fasteners. And I'm doing those things because they really help me. And that has led me into, that's the stuff I understand. And my MG really is the one who made me that the expert in it too. I do feel like I know how to do those things because of my myasthenia gravis. So that's led to my profession. The other thing I will say is I want to touch up. Am I doing okay for time? Or
you are? Yep, you're doing fine.
Okay. Is another element that's really helped me move forward throughout my life is my faith, and my faith in God, and having something to look forward to, and knowing that my myasthenia gravis is not the end all. It's the beginning of a more caring me, a more compassionate me, a more empathetic me, a more patient and I think adaptable me. And it is something that has shaped me throughout my life. Staying focused and focusing on those things that I can control have led me to where I'm at. I lost my train of thought there for a second. Hold on, what was I saying? It was a good one. So I get a little caught. Oh, with my faith, I get a little caught up because for me, losing control of that, or knowing that, you know, things happen all the time to people, and your myasthenia gravis, you know, your medical things, a lot of them you can't do anything about. And having that belief that you have that for a reason, or accepting where you're at and thinking this is my purpose, and really using that to move forward. If that makes sense. Like not saying, oh, not getting set on one way. Like I want to be a gymnast when I couldn't be a gymnast, or I found out, hey, I got this medical condition. I didn't sit there and figure out ways to make me be able to tumble again. You know, you redirect and you say, hey, God doesn't want me to be a tumbler. Let's see what he has in store. And having that faith is how I tackled that every way that I coped with it, I guess. And when I couldn't do that's how I coped with my illness and my exacerbations when they were bad. When I was at my worst, or I couldn't do anything at all, I would pray and I would say, you know, thank you, God, for giving me my myasthenia gravis, and help me to use it, you know, to offer it up to other people and be able to educate other people. And that gives my myasthenia gravis function or purpose. So I guess anything, if you have that outlook that you have this for a reason, how can I use it to help others, gives your myasthenia gravis purpose. And that really helped me through those hard times, is knowing that I have it for a reason. And now being able to share my story helps me to accept it, you know. And I think we all have these paths in life, and we can't control them, and we can't do anything about them. We accept them. But use what you learn to help others. And that's really the key, you know. Don't focus on what you can't do, focus on what you can. And if you want to get there to a certain place, there are ways that you can do it, and you can adapt and move on. And that has been the key to everything for me. And knowing that this isn't the end of life, you know, I've lived quite a bit. And when I don't have the strength to do a lot, I know that I have enough to do what I need to for that day. And, you know, it isn't easy, and it's a lot harder for people with illnesses. You know, it really is. You're doing things a lot harder than it is for other people. I don't know how to explain it, but it is. Life is harder just having to deal with the medical field alone. If I didn't have to deal with that, I don't think I would have any problems. But of course, that's not the case. You have other problems. Yeah. But this is that's the biggest issue that you deal with in life. But I'm an expert now, and that's my purpose, you know. And that's Aimee, what helps me get through it. So it really is a blessing.
We're starting to get questions in, and I wanted to let you have an opportunity to take a drink.
Yeah, I'm done.
Lisa's going to start doing the questions. But one of the things I thought about for your mom is that, you know, that repository of all your records and things like that, being able to have those for a second opinion. And, you know, what are some guidance that maybe your parents found in even making sure that, because as a child, you're not keeping those records yourself, but making sure that there is a recommendations for building that database and record keeping in order to have those records for later. Do you have any guidance on that?
Well, especially when you're changing neurologists or changing what part of the country you're living in, that's what sort of forced us into keeping those records. actually, I had all the paperwork and tons of it, but when we decided to go to Mayo, we needed to have data. And so we sat and we went through all those papers and just sort of put them on a spreadsheet, like, and just kept, and we lived this life. We lived it. We went through the different neurologists, and it was just so beneficial. At the same time we were going to Mayo, Aimee was moving from Houston, and she had lost her real neurologist back there. And so she was moving back to Michigan. And actually, Dr. Twidell had given a talk over in Traverse City, and John and I went over there and met him. And I told him about Aimee and her story a little bit. And he said, well, if she ever needs a neurologist, I'd like to see her. And so when she came back to Michigan, we contacted him, and he was, I think at the time, on the MG board there, and he took her in as a patient. And
I love him.
We prepared all of that data for him too, so that he knew. Keeping that data, I think, is really important, because you never know when you're going to lose your neurologist, or you're going to move for some reason to another area, and you've got it right there. And that you can say, this is what I did. This is what I did. And that just helped him and Mayo too. In fact, they had scheduled several different tests there. And once they looked at that data, they said, we don't need to take these tests. And it was good. It was beneficial.
And there are, what I found, like when I would go to a new city, Mom would research all the different neurologists, and a lot of them would have connections to another neurologist or another place in that state. And it's funny because I'll look back and I'm like, oh, that's who I'm seeing now. But it was a name in a different time, so it is somewhat of a small community. One thing in California, when I was there, I had infection is another thing that really led to one of my bad exacerbations. I've only had about 4 or 5. And infection, I had a spider bite, and I mean, I was on antibiotics. I did everything, and it just went out of hand. I needed to ask for a culture and sensitivity test, so I was taking the right antibiotics to know that which ones were working. But that's what I learned from that. But when
I'm going to jump in, if you don't mind, just to make sure we get some of the questions answered.
Oh,
yeah. It's so important what you're saying, but also what your mother is saying, and your father alluded to it also, that it was great that you sought out the Mayo help, but the fact that somebody was keeping records and you could give those records to the doctor, so you're not starting in a room with 15 to 20 minutes trying to, recollect everything. Yes. And it's all very well organized, in sequence, etc. But
this is one of 5. Yeah. That's one of 5. Yeah. And it's like labeled, and I've got years. I've got summaries on every one of that year, with basically the year and what happened and who I saw.
Okay, you get the you get the prize. Though. But you have a question from Scott and from Esther and from me about Solaris, and we recognize that you're not a physician. I'm going to summarize the 3 questions. You can choose where you'd like to start, and I'll keep track so that all 3 are answered, if that's okay. So the one question is, well, my question is, you can weave that in, but it was, could you explain a little bit what it means when you say you're treated by Solaris, you're taking Solaris, number 1, and then number 2, why is Solaris to you preferable over IVIG, if you feel that you're competent to answer that, and 3 is, how long did it take you to feel positive effects after starting Solaris? So wherever you want to start with those 3, and I'll make sure all 3 are answered.
First, easiest one, I felt within the next day, immediate effect from Solaris. And I have facial. I had a smile, and I haven't lost it since. Like, my facial weakness is gone completely. That was the biggest thing. The other thing for the majority of time, other than endurance and sometimes double vision, if I'm really do a lot with my eyes that day, at the end of the day, I'm pretty symptom free with the Solaris. Whereas before I'd kind of have these highs and lows, and that facial weakness was hard. I'd start with a smile, and then by the end of the day, it was really hard for me to maintain it. And especially when I was tired. With Solaris, I have not had any of that. So much stronger. I will say, so that's the immediate effect with that. Now I don't feel, now they're kind of maintenance. Sometimes I'm tired when I get them, I don't feel this huge burst of energy, but, I've asked to back off on them a little bit every 2 weeks, but because that's the prescription and that's the protocol, we stick to that for now. The next one, that with the Solaris and the IVIG, they do different things. So each of these, and I'll let the doctors deal with that because I understand it to my little knowledge, but depending on what type of MG you do, each of these medications are doing somewhat of a different thing. There's like the Imuran and the immunosuppressants that suppress the immune system. And those are like the Imuran, your cyclosporin, your Cellcept. I take one of those. I take the Cellcept to improve my or for my immunosuppressant. But Solaris deals with the
receptor, doesn't it?
Yeah, my dad will talk a little bit, but it does different things. So the IVIG and I feel like Solaris are different drugs. But I also, the reason that I didn't go with IVIG, because I know a lot of people that it really works with, I didn't feel much better with it. But I think it was a long time ago. I think there's different protocol now that maybe I'd feel differently. But it didn't work very well for me. That's why I didn't go with it. But I think everybody needs to kind of talk to their doctor about which one works for them at that time too.
Just one last thing. You mentioned something about, well, one last thing. You mentioned something about every 2 weeks Solaris, but what does that mean? Does it take all day infusion or an injection or?
Okay, so I get an infusion and the nurse comes to my house. And so the medication is delivered to my house. And then every 2 weeks, a nurse comes and it takes about a half hour and I just have an infusion of the medication. I do have to have the IV given, or a needle, but it's pretty invasive. Or to me, it's easy. And she comes anytime, basically. It's like maybe an hour tops. But, they do stay an hour for a while to monitor your symptoms. But then I've been on it for a few years now. And so, yeah.
Great, thank you. Mr. Jastic, we'd like you to be able to speak. We've all had a little, thank you for waiting patiently.
Oh, sorry.
I went somewhere.
Sorry, there we are.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is the only thing I was going to add is that I said earlier that your neurologist becomes your partner, and in this case, I know my wife and I have been to several different functions looking at different treatments, and one of them is obviously some of the seminars you people put on where you had doctors there, and this is a relatively newer form of treatment. The treatments that we had been used to up till then had just treated the symptoms. You can take mastodon, you can take prednisone. They treat the symptoms, but the disease is nevertheless predominant. And now what we found out is now the new class of these new drugs that are coming along actually start to begin to treat the reason why things are not working. And so that was a new element to us. We went to see our neurologist. We started talking about this, and he said, "Hey, I think it will. Why don't we give it a try?" And sure enough, away we went, and it worked surprisingly well for her. No question.
And it makes sense when you look. It keeps keeps like the wall of your neuromuscular junction intact, so it's not breaking down, it's not being damaged, and it's kind of it makes sense in the whole of things, kind of where the new drugs are going. If you go to those conferences and things, it is one I have to take the meningitis vaccine. I have to take it in the beginning before I have it, and then the meningitis, I think it was B, a year after too. So I do have to have those things, and I'm not sure if it's if it's one that affects your kidneys and things like that, which some of those immunosuppressants can do. So I'm not sure if everyone can always take some of them. You really do have to talk to your doctor, but it is exciting for me. And I have seen it changed so much. I'm really hopeful. I really do think there'll be a cure in my lifetime. I really am. I think the treatment options are out there are pretty amazing. I'm going to look into the ionic foot bath and all that coming up. Yeah.
One of the things that, we're in this phase of where MG treatments, we're in kind of the abundance phase of MG treatments because of the investments companies started making when they could do the rare disease. So they were given credits for the rare disease and started that investment then. And while that happened 5 to 7 years ago, we're really seeing the fruits of that now with the number of medications that came out. And I think that we don't actually think about how long it takes to actually bring a drug to market like that. But even the fact that they have to do all the trials, the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials, and also get it FDA approved, which we're, for each one we celebrate because there's options then. And I think we are in this abundance phase. 2 more will come out this year, and there's other ones in the pipeline. One of the things I put in the chat is if you don't have a Sue Jessic to keep all your records, there is a place called Picnic Health that is a service that if you know the places that you got care, if you know the places or institutions where you got care, Picnic Health will take the ball with that and you put them in there, and they will collect your records from those systems and index them for you chronologically and make them available to you. It's a service for MG and for MS. It is free because they've helped people who are they are part of that drug development chain. But it is a service, and we use it for MS a lot because a lot of times the imaging that was done for people with MS was done maybe in an emergency room in some place that they don't even visit anymore. But being able to collect that stuff. But I love it that your mom, you have all those things and that they're there, and also make sure that they're imaged, but also, the fact that if you can't do that, or if it's too labor intensive to do it, there is a service that does that.
Good.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
we logging things, doing the ADL checklist, those things are so important, I find, to manage my symptoms. I'll be like, oh, I felt bad for so long. And then I look at my log of all I'm doing, I realize I should be tired, or maybe this is my norm. Or I realize, oh my gosh, this isn't normal, or I have felt this long for this long. Collecting data is so important to decide what type of treatment to have and to help your neurologist know what's going on.
Would you spell the name of that service, please?
Sure. It's Picnic, PICNIC, like the word picnic basket, picnichealth.com. And I did put the link in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Got it.
Yeah.
One of the things that, as you go through life, and women, you mentioned, one, having a child, and that's a change in hormones and all that sort of stuff. And for women and men, hormones change throughout our lives. And, you can go along and all of a sudden you hit childbearing and then menopause and all of those things, and things act differently during those times. And I also think that that's a learning for us that even though we might be in a therapy that's that's keeping us on, you know, a plateau, the changes in what happens with our life might make those changes that we don't anticipate, and having those, having the ability to have a doctor who you have a partnership with, I think has really been a blessing for you, all throughout that time, but also being able to reach out and have a second opinion. I think that that's really been, you know, a good learning, and not being worried about. I think that getting care in Germany, you know, that when I think about the logistics of all that, because having to get overseas treatment and medication and all that, that's quite a tribute to really that logistical planning and engineering mindset that you need to have to do that. So I just really think that that's remarkable.
Yep.
And some of it was done ahead of time, you know, like we knew somewhat who to, you know, we had contacted doctors. This is what's going on. I'm traveling here. There's a big network. One thing, look at research in Europe. They're doing it because they have a lot of medicines and a lot of treatments that we don't have here, or they're using that we're not. And so it's really neat. And I think it's great to look into that too. And the MD and one of the foundations we used in California, because I don't know why we didn't use the MG one. I'll look at my mom's notes, but the MDA clinic was the one that I went to for my neurologist, and they were fantastic. And so those other research and outlooks, and I feel like the research or all these networks have been done for us for people like Esther and you, and so use them as much as possible, because that's what helped me through everything. Mom and Dad would, if something happened, we call my old neurologist, we call Esther, and she's always willing to help me through everything. So it's been so helpful to use these services. Yeah, they work.
Yes, they do.
Lisa, how are we doing on the questions?
Yeah.
Yes, I think all the questions now have been responded to. And we have 2 minutes. So Susan, anything?
Well, you mentioned eating well and exercise. And as we're planning for our conference this year, which is October 5th in Lansing, save the date of October 5th. This year we are planning both the science part, so the doctors, but also we will have a person who I just saw at a MS conference, and he was fantastic. He was from Milwaukee, and you mentioned Milwaukee earlier, but he is an expert in yoga for neurological conditions, specifically MS and MG. And it was, you know, the fact that he was at a conference that I was actually presenting at in Grand Rapids, I thought, wow, we were just talking about needing somebody. So I've already talked to him about that, and also eating well. And I found out at the same conference that Meyer now has a service that actually can, with nutritionists that are free to consult, and be able to really put a dietary plan together based on both not only the medication you might be on, but also having it for a, you know, disease specific things. So while I haven't gotten a commitment from them yet, that is something that I think Meyer has a specialty pharmacy now that also is something that can coordinate a lot of different places. So those are all things that we don't think about it having an opportunity, but Meyer being a Michigan company and is really in at least 6 states now, it gives us an option of really not just specifically who your local nutritionists are, but Meyer now has it and can deliver it through their local stores.
Oh, that is awesome.
Neat.
So save the date of October 5th. Lisa, do we have any other things that I needed to mention?
No, October 5th. And that Rhonda already posted in the chat that Alexian will be giving a presentation on Ultramuris. one of the new treatments. In our conference, we're also going to talk about all the new treatments available. And then also, as we always love to wrap up the conference with what is to be coming. And along with this theme of wellness that Susan's speaking of, we're also hoping to have someone to talk a lot about what Aimee talked about with regard to adapting something in your life, whether it's your thoughts or an activity that really brings a lot of meaning to you, so you still feel that your life has meaning and importance. And now that brings us to 7:31.
Thank you, Aimee and Sue and John for really giving us a front row seat to that. And I just think that, you know, it's never easy to have a child who has an illness, but kudos that she stayed engaged in all the things that she wanted to, and the full life she has. And I'm really eager to hear about, since I work in that area of people with disabilities, the adaptive clothing, which is so needed for Parkinson's, MS, so many different things.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
I'm using this amazing zipper right now. I just modified a coat for one of my patients with Parkinson's, and it's magnetic, and it goes click, and then you zip it right up. It is amazing, and it's all out there. You know, it's just bringing it more into relevance, because there's such a need, especially where I am. You know, and I am a expert because I've had to do that. And I'm sure a lot of you, I mean, without even thinking, if you can't get your arms up one day, you're, you know, finding clothes that are larger, you're finding movements that work, you're using your bigger muscles versus those fine motor when you don't have the grasp. We're doing these things already. And so I'm really excited. And I'll probably be asking feedback, and you'll be annoyed. I appreciate everything, though, that I love this. Support groups really helped. And I really, if anybody ever needs, you know, help or support or wants to reach out or anything, I will always, I mean, I'm always available, and you're always welcome to call me, email, text. I'll help the best I can.
We want to thank the MG Foundation too, because they helped us through this path right from the very beginning. We always had a number to call for help and guidance, and it's been wonderful to have these access to get to the support meetings, to get to the conferences that just keep us educated on what we needed to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Again, we are recording it, so this will be available. If you came in late, of course, you'll be able to see the whole program on our website. If you are interested in Aimee's clothing or what some of the things she does, maybe that's something we can talk to her about, bringing some samples to the conference on October 5th.
Yeah, I'll bring some. I'm wearing one right now. It's a backwards magnetic fastener, and so the shirt doesn't have to go over. It connects in back, and it's got a magnetic fastener. And shoulder injuries, joint protection. I'd love to show people, but look on Amazon. Look up adaptive clothing on Amazon. Tommy Hilfiger has a whole collection.
They can email you as you offered as well.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Join us for our Altamirus presentation, or the Altamirus presentation on March 19th, which is with Julie Burnham, Dr. Julie Burnham. And it's on the Altamirus website. It is in the chat. And thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Aimee. Thank you, John. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Lisa. And of course, Rhonda and Esther and all the rest of the foundation. Amazing family. We appreciate it. We'll be looking for other people who want to talk about their path. Please send to Esther or Rhonda an email if that's something you're interested in doing. But thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Fantastic.